This is the Meaningful Content Mixer. We are your co-hosts. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Bonnie. This podcast is for content creators seeking inspiration across disciplines to create more meaningful content.
From pre-sales to post-sales, we want to learn from each other because we are experienced enough to know how much we don't know yet.
Let's get started. So last week we talked to Aaron Fulkerson, and we talked about success content.
Yep. And that last mile concept of making sure that you're not just creating content and outputting it in a PDF or in a format or deliverable that doesn't really help the customer apply it. So that the last mile concept is thinking about the success content from a topic perspective and a delivery perspective, that it's where that customer is in order for them to actually apply it in their real life.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite takeaways from that discussion?
Yeah, there was so much that we talked about that I thought was really useful. For me, my favorite kind of light bulb moment is when Aaron was talking about kind of the operations of how you internally identify what these topics are that are necessary or are useful for the success content, and almost creating a database of topics that are relevant to your customers from this use case perspective. And then I mentioned SEO because, of course, we've done an episode about SEO in the past, and it's very relevant. And the two topics almost felt at odds to me. That, SEO, my impression of it is that it's very much going out there and seeing what prospects, non-customers are searching and trying to create content that's optimized for them, versus this, customer-driven success content. And what Aaron pointed out that was really enlightening to me is that, of course, you still do both, but it's about order of operations. That first you identify these topics among your customers and understanding what really helps them achieve their KPIs or level up in whatever they're trying to do. And so once you have those topics identified and you create this content, then you layer in SEO to of course make sure that people, wherever they are looking for that content, whether they are prospects or customers, SEO makes sure that content that you spend all that effort creating gets in front of people through search engines.
Yeah. And I think, one of my takeaways is along those same lines, but really around when you said customer driven, that really resonated with me because, when we're creating content from let's say you're a technical writer creating product documentation, you are considering the user, you're considering what tasks they'll need to accomplish with the product, and you're documenting, how to complete those tasks. But when we think about success content, it's not really task-based, it's more use case-based.
Yeah.
And so, a single use case can have multiple major tasks, if you will. But it's really about applying, creating that content that supports the customer in what they are trying to achieve to bring value to their business or organization. And so the difference there is that, we can come up with all of the how-to content that we know that this product can help you do, but the success content really needs to come from the customer's needs and what they're saying they need to do with the product.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think I've said this before in previous episodes, but I think about it in terms of scope, which is that your typical, your bare minimum content, the scope of that is about your product or service that your company creates. Whereas what we're talking about here, this use case or this customer driven success content, you expand your scope and you consider what other tools or services they're using in conjunction with it, and make sure that your content is probably also now talking about the relationship of your tool with other tools and how, again, like you said, that use case for the customer, what they're trying to do, you kind of cover that wider scope from their perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And it has more, you get more context, right? With success content, you get more around why you need to complete this task and how it fits into a bigger picture.
Yeah, context, of course, is the perfect word for it. Should we talk through maybe some examples we have to illustrate these concepts?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so I'm gonna show some examples here. I'm sharing my screen. If you're watching, if you're listening, we will link to these examples in the show notes. So I wanted to talk about two different examples. The first one is a B2B example, business to business. That's kind of where Aaron was coming from, I think, in most of what he was talking about, but we'll show a B2C example in a minute. But first, starting with TechSmith, they make a product called Snagit, which is a screenshot tool. Its most basic features. It does way more than that now, which you'll maybe get a hint of. But yeah, so I would think that they do a great job of creating what we would call success content. It's way more than just how to do what you're trying to do in their product. It's more than just how to take a screenshot or
Yeah.
to create visuals. A couple quick examples. What we're looking at here is a blog post called How to Document a Process in Just a Few Clicks. So it certainly sounds like something that could just be a documentation topic that's just talking about how to use Snagit to, create screenshots to document a process. But as
Mhm.
we look through this blog post, I'm going to scroll down here to a couple specific sections. They weave in a lot of what I would call this success content. They're talking about best practices. They're including data here. 67% of people understand information better when it's communicated visually. So of course
Mhm.
they're showing data that backs up why you should use their product, but they're really making you understand why it would be useful to do
Mhm.
that. And then some extra advice they have in here that I really like, that again connects the use case of the user with their
Mhm.
product really well. So they have this simplify tool. So they talk about the benefits of using a simplify tool to make screenshots more simplified so that they have actually increased longevity, in terms of you don't have to update the screenshot as often when little elements change. And they include an example of what that looks like. And then they go even further. Here they're talking about aiming for evergreen content. So to me, this really gets into the territory of success content rather than
Mhm.
just how to, because they're giving us guidance of, this evergreen concept of how can we think about how we're creating content that is going to last longer. Because as a content creator with a job, like one of my KPIs is, how much I can get done or how often I maybe have to go back and update something due to changes. So, Snagit here, TechSmith guiding me to think about evergreen content is going to help me be better at my job because I'm not going to have to waste time going back and editing things. They even include, like, here's a perfect example. They're talking about how to schedule reminders of when to go back and look at content. So, of course, that's now talking about a calendar tool, which has nothing to
Mhm.
do with Snagit, but is
Yep.
relevant in this use case. There's something that we talked about with Aaron last time, in this sort of realm of success content of what we're seeing as the trends, and we are seeing more and more of this success content. I would say TechSmith does a better job than others. But one thing that we talked about that's a challenge or maybe a current weakness in how the success content gets implemented is sometimes it's still that great content is there, but it's a little bit fragmented or siloed from the customer journey
Mhm.
perspective. And that I think the next sort of the next frontier of, content creators is merging or blending all this content together in a more seamless way for end users. So
Mhm.
again, I love TechSmith and I love Snagit. So I'm being a little bit constructive in my next comments here. But if we look at their website, from their main menu, I can hover over this support menu, and my options include a help center, which says troubleshooting and help files. I can also get to tutorials, which is product videos, tutorials, and guides. I can also get to webinars, says it's more in the getting started realm, but it's another sort of format. I can also, from their main menu, hover over resources, where I'd find their blog, which the description says tips, best practices, and expert advice. We were just looking at a blog post. They're great. It's great content. but also here I can get to TechSmith Academy, which is free video courses. So reading through all of that, you can sort of imagine that there are different folks working on those different formats and resources internally, as they should. But as an end user, I don't necessarily know where I need to go to find the best topic of content that's relevant for me, because it does still seem a little bit divided into separate silos based off of the sort of format or maybe the internal workflow that gets created. And I can imagine a more useful scenario where I go to one place and all of these formats are blended together and I'm looking based off of the topic that I need rather than format. So should we look at a B2C example instead? IKEA, maybe you've heard of it. I think most people have. So actually the reason I thought of checking out IKEA for an example is because the week that we're recording this conversation, IKEA came out with the news that they're discontinuing their beloved printed catalog that's been for 70 years. So that's a discussion for another time about how that printed item and focusing in on digital. But in the article that I was reading about it on NPR, one of their higher ups talked about how the reason behind the change is they're trying to really focus their resources on meeting the customers where they are. And what I found is these IKEA planning tools. Oh, nice. And if you look at these IKEA planning tools, they say that it's a way to do more than it's more than an online product catalog, right? It's a way to envision how you can use IKEA products to create your home. You can plan your home, your entire home. You can plan just your kitchen or your bathroom. They talk about the different sort of flavors of these planning tools. There's a kitchen planner here. There's a dining chair planner. And if you actually click into the tool, it lets you build out an entire, home concept with, in this case, it's intended to be IKEA products, but in some cases you might end up incorporating products that aren't IKEA along with the IKEA product.
When you think about it, a chair only has so many uses. So if you're just thinking about the functional documentation, there's only so far you can go with that chair. But if IKEA can get their customers, can provide more value for the customers than just a place to sit, their customers are more likely to come back, because as we start thinking more about the customer experience and customer success, and businesses start having that more customer centricity, we're going to need to have success content even more. And I do have an example of, healthcare. So let me share my screen and just kind of show you that example.
Seamless.
Okay, so this is just an example of, something in the healthcare industry where they have documentation. So I just went to the Learn tab here, and there's a lot of different types of information here. So, choosing a health plan, learn what to look for, the difference between HMO and PPO, 5 terms to know. So these are all good at supporting specific things. Making smart healthcare decisions. And we have 101. So what is it? What is it like to be a member? And then moving further down, you can shop the plans, get information about doctors and location, or you can discover new ways to thrive. So, we don't normally think about healthcare as, a place where I don't normally think about healthcare as a prime example for documentation, because I'm more in the tech space. But, when you think about it, businesses need to be able to create customer lifetime value, and just providing what they need in that moment isn't enough. And that goes back to that extra mile, or that last mile, and giving them, what they need now and what they need to continue to be successful with your product or service.
Yeah, I love this example. Again, I like how, we're so used to sort of like the tech and software space, and this is quite different. But if you apply these concepts on this page that you're showing, the examples that you just mentioned on this page, you can see this blending of the how-to content and the success content all in one place.
Mm-hmm.
From us as end users, we don't really care which category it falls in. We need them all covered.
Yeah.
So the how-to content is more about like shopping your plans. Should you do HMO or PPO, right? I need to actually make a
Mm-hmm.
decision when I'm buying my healthcare. And then they have
Yeah.
other topics that go beyond just making healthcare plan decisions, making the most
Yeah.
doctor's appointment, and
Mm-hmm.
widening the scope of health in general, making smart healthcare decisions.
Yeah.
So to me, we're seeing a great blend of that how-to documentation content and
Mm-hmm.
the success
Yeah.
topics.
And, none of these have anything to do with a specific doctor or with Kaiser in like specifically. They
Right.
do call out, specifically Kaiser, but this is valuable information whether or not you're one of their clients.
Yeah.
Um,
It's good.
so yeah, so I thought this was a good example from the healthcare
Nice.
world.
So yeah, I love the examples that we looked at today. Our favorite takeaways from our conversation with Aaron. I think we'd love to hear from other folks who are tuning in more examples of this
Yeah.
success content. How are our fellow content professionals tackling this challenge in their respective industries or companies? And I think the more that we can highlight good examples, it's just going to
Hmm.
inspire the rest of us to do better at this. Okay, so tons of examples, lots to do here. Again, I hope to hear from our listeners some examples that they have that we'd love to re-share on our social channels, and we'll keep the conversation going. Okay, until next time, Bonnie.
All right, till next time. Bye.
Bye.